A cult is a tricky thing to pin down. Some argued that authoritarian regimes, like those under Stalin or Mao, were essentially massive secular cults. The total loss of individual autonomy, the expectation of blind loyalty, and the brutal punishment of dissenters all signal classic cult behavior. But do they fit the textbook definition? Not exactly. Others claim that major religions like Catholicism, Islam, and Mormonism qualify as cults. While these faiths may exhibit certain cult-like tendencies and have certainly given rise to breakaway sects that fit the mold, they can't broadly be labeled as such. The groups in this video, however, leave little space for debate. Each one, in its own twisted way, embodies the most widely accepted definition of a cult: a small, often religious faction that strips its members of autonomy. And the behaviors? Let's just say that coercion, financial extortion, and bizarre sex rituals are just the tip of the iceberg. The real themes here? Murder, madness, and mayhem. Hi, I'm Alina. Welcome to, or welcome back to my channel. In 1988, a doomsday prophecy led by Catholic sect leader Lydia Nakarato spiraled into a nightmare of violence inside a secluded Italian farmhouse. Convinced that the end of the world was near, she gathered 35 devoted followers, ready to commit unthinkable acts in the name of salvation. The horror came to light when a bloodied and terrified victim escaped, reporting to authorities that the cult had tried to sacrifice him, going so far as to shoot him in the process. When police stormed the farmhouse, they found a chilling scene. Dozens of cult members swaying in a trance, murmuring Hail Mary over and over. As officers searched the home, the sinister nature of the cult's activities became clear. A dismembered cat lay beside two framed pictures, one of the Virgin Mary, the other of Nakarato's deceased father, Antonio. But the discoveries didn't stop there. A corpse was found, bound in a manner eerily similar to the execution style by the one of Italy's most ruthless crime syndicates. Could the cult have been more than just a fanatical religious group? The farmhouse was an arsenal. Police uncovered a staggering cache of weapons, guns, knives, and ammunition, alongside hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash. It was clear that Nakarato's apocalyptic vision had fueled more than just blind faith. It had birthed a deadly operation with possible ties to organized crime. Following her arrest, Lydia Nakarato became the subject of psychiatric evaluation by the renowned Dr. Maria Di Fiorino, as experts tried to unravel the mind behind one of Italy's most disturbing cults. Christianity took root in South Korea like nowhere else in East Asia, with nearly a third of the population embracing the faith. But where religion flourishes, fringe sects often follow. In 1987, a gruesome discovery shocked Seoul. 33 bodies, bound and gagged, crammed into the attic of a factory. The victims were members of a splinter group of the Evangelical Church of Korea, and the factory itself was linked to Odaeyang Trading Co., a business owned by the cult's leader, Park Sun-ja. Park had been running a massive scam, swindling her followers out of more than $8 million. When authorities began closing in, things took a deadly turn. Investigators ruled the case a murder-suicide, a hallmark of doomsday cults. But who orchestrated it? The probe into Odaeyang Trading Co. revealed a shocking connection: the Evangelical Church's overall leader, Yahweh. While he was arrested and convicted of fraud, no one was ever held accountable for the horrifying deaths in the attic. Not all outsiders who move into rural communities are met with open arms. Locals often grumble about city dwellers, buying up second homes that sit empty for most of the year, failing to learn the native language where applicable, and driving up house prices. This affair concerns, though the situation is rarely black and white. That is, unless the newcomers happen happened to be a Satanic PDF file grape cult. Such was the case when Colin Bately and his followers relocated from London to the historic seaside village of Sidewelly, West Wales in the 1990s. Once known for its medieval castle and the heroic last stand of Welsh warrior princes against Norman invaders, the town soon found itself under siege of a different kind of horror. Bately and his 4 female acolytes were devoted followers of Aleister Crowley and his notorious early 20th century sex cult Thelema. Their crimes were beyond sickening. Authorities brought 33 charges against the cult, including indecent assault, forced prostitution, rape, and inciting a child to have sex. The court handed down prison sentences ranging from 3 to 13 years for 5 members of the group, 4 women and 70-year-old Vincent Barden from Capstan, Bedfordshire. Bately, the ringleader, received an indefinite sentence, with a minimum of 12 years, meaning he could spend the rest of his life behind bars. What started as a quiet village retreat turned into a nightmare, proving that sometimes the worst horrors aren't ancient legends, they move in next door. If the ongoing conflict with Boko Haram wasn't harrowing enough, Nigerian authorities had also had to battle gruesome crimes committed by violent practitioners of folk magic. In 2014, one such group emerged in horrifying fashion near the city of Ibadan, leaving behind a crime scene that ranks among the most chilling in the nation's history. It all started when the motorcyclist venturing through the dense Soka forest stumbled upon a nightmare: decomposing bodies scattered across the area. Authorities were alerted, and when police arrived, they uncovered an even more horrifying reality. A nearby building, seemingly abandoned, was filled with piles of clothing belonging to both adults and children, alongside valuables believed to have been taken from kidnapped victims. Even more disturbing, officers discovered several malnourished captives who had been held prisoner, their fate almost certainly tied to the dark rituals being practiced at the site. Investigators, along with the outraged public, became convinced that this was no ordinary crime scene. It was a body part harvesting farm. The ritualists running the operation allegedly supplied human body parts, blood, and flesh to buyers seeking to perform sinister rites. For years, the case remained a dark stain on Ibadan's history. But in 2020, authorities finally made a series of arrests. Among those taken into custody was Sunday Shodip, a suspected ritual killer. However, the horror didn't end there. While in custody, Shodip managed to escape, and rather than flee, he returned to his deadly mission. Acting under the orders of his 50-year-old associate, Idris Baba Jani, who was also in police custody, Shodip struck again. Reports confirmed that while on the run, he murdered a woman in Akinele district, just north of Ibadan. Even in the face of justice, the terror wrought by these rituals refused to die easily. White supremacist Christian identity movements have long existed in the US, pushing dangerous conspiracy theories, fueling anti-government paranoia, and occasionally resorting to violence. Though their numbers remain relatively small, the damage they inflict can be devastating. One of the most notorious figures in this extremist world was Michael Wayne Bryan of Rulo, Nebraska. His fanaticism went beyond mere ideology. It became a full-blown cult. In the economically ravaged landscape of 1980s rural Nebraska, Bryan found easy prey in struggling farmers and laborers desperate for hope. As a disciple of Christian identity movement leader James Wickstrom, he preached apocalyptic prophecies and positioned himself as a divine mouthpiece, claiming to speak directly to God, whom he referred to as Yahweh. His followers, eager for purpose, obeyed without question. Under Ryan's command, they began burglarizing homes to fund their movement. But theft was only the beginning. Drunk on power, Ryan declared himself as the king, took multiple wives, and warned of an impending race war that only his chosen followers would survive. Any dissent was met with horrifying punishments: forced bestiality with goats, sodomy, and even child abuse. He maintained his grip through terror, ordering brutal executions of disobedient cult members. His reign of depravity finally ended in 1986, when he was arrested and convicted to multiple crimes including murder. Sentenced to death, he languished behind bars for nearly 3 decades, before dying in prison in 2015, taking his twisted visions of power and prophecy to the grave. Back when the internet was just a tool for scientists to swap research data, did anyone imagine it would one day give rise to a blood magic cult? Probably not, but here we are. Enter Blood Over Intent, a bizarre online movement led by a man who claims to be the reincarnation of Satan, which raises an interesting question. Did Satan die? Must have missed that headline. This cult, primarily spreading its doctrine on YouTube, demands unwavering loyalty from followers. And how do they prove their devotion? By performing a bloodletting ritual, of course. The idea is that by offering their own blood, adherents secure a place among the chosen few who will, shocker, survive the impending apocalypse. While it might sound like internet lunacy at its peak, history has shown us that the cults, no matter how absurd they seem at first, can spiral into something far more dangerous. The warning signs are there, and if past doomsday groups are any indication, this could take a dark turn. Let's just hope it doesn't end in tragedy. In 2007, Petr Kuznetsov, the charismatic leader of a 30-member sect of the Russian Orthodox Church, convinced his followers that the end of the world was near, a classic doomsday prediction. He instructed his devoted group to retreat into a cave deep in the Russian taiga, where they would wait for Armageddon to unfold in 2008. Ironically, Kuznetsov himself didn't join them, choosing instead to get arrested. As authorities grew concerned for their safety and attempted to pull them out, the group threatened mass suicide, refusing to leave their cave. Over time, tragedy struck. One member succumbed to cancer, another starved to death. The horrifying scent of decomposing bodies started to unsettle the remaining believers, prompting a few to flee. But the real turning point came in 2008, the year the world was meant to end, according to Kuznetsov's prophecy. As the cave's roof began to collapse, the remaining followers finally had enough. Kuznetsov, grappling with the fact that his predictions had failed, and realizing the horrors he had led 30 people to endure, attempted suicide. Instead of facing the consequences of his actions, he ended up in psychiatric care for the next decade. A man whose prophecy crumbled just like the cave he'd forced his followers to hide in. Remember reading about when Jesus collected young girls to be in his harem before directing his followers to kill and eat them when he was done? No? That's not in the Bible? Someone should have told Stephen Terry, Papua New Guinea self-styled Black Jesus, because that's what he did. As a minister, Terry had amassed a following of around 6,000 followers into his pseudo-Christian cult. His many flower girls, scantily clad concubines that were largely underage, prompted the Lutheran Church of PNG to declare Terry an enemy of the church. Terry, aided by the so-called queen of Terry's flower girls, Bramerhal Herman, raped and killed 13-year-old Rita Herman, Bramerhal's daughter. He is also suspected of further sacrificial murders and cannibalism. He was eventually arrested in 2005. Terry convinced a Lutheran minister who was counseling him to join his flock, aiding the murderous cult leader in his escape. What did he do on the run? Why? Collect more underage girls for his harem, of course. By 2007, some villagers that had grown tired of Terry's crimes dragged him from his mountain stronghold and beat him to within an inch of his life. By 2010, he had recovered enough to stand trial and was duly sentenced to 20 years in prison. But the ever-resourceful Black Jesus managed to pull another miracle. By escaping prison in 2013, after allegedly murdering another woman in the village of Gal, Medang province, Terry ran out of luck. The enraged villagers hacked him to pieces. He did not rise from the dead. The Chandawat family from Burari, India, seemed like any other well-respected family on the surface, but beneath that facade they were living a chilling double life. In 2018, a family friend grew concerned when the Chandawat's grocery store remained closed. Deciding to check on them, he entered their home. What he discovered was beyond terrifying. Inside, all 11 family members were dead. 10 of them were found hanging from the ceiling in the hallway, their hands tied, heads covered in cloth, and mouths and eyes masked. The eldest family member, 77-year-old Narayani Devi, was discovered strangled in an adjoining room. The scene was eerily calm with no signs of struggle, almost as if the family had willingly taken part in this twisted ritual. Upon investigating, the police uncovered journals and diaries that revealed a disturbing truth. Latit Chundawad, the 45-year-old head of the family, believed he had become possessed by the spirit of his deceased father. Over the years, he had been performing rituals to bring prosperity to the family. The rituals he conducted involved hanging themselves, convinced that they would all return from the dead. In a kitchen, a bowl of chana dal was found soaking, possibly prepared for a meal the following day, adding to the surreal nature of the situation. The lack of resistance suggested they had all gone along with the ritual willingly, perhaps not realizing the horrifying consequences. This tragic and bizarre case of mass psychosis mirrors the kind of mass delusion typically seen in doomsday cults, except this time it was a family drawn into a destructive spiral of belief, death, and madness. In a chilling twist of fate, a group of self-proclaimed lay preachers descended upon the coastal region of Panama, aiming to convert the native people. But rather than spreading the peaceful message of Christianity, these zealots took a far darker approach, adopting a style more akin to the Spanish Inquisition than any traditional form of evangelism. Under the banner of the sect, New Light of God, they sought to force the villagers into repentance, but their methods were nothing short of horrific. To save the locals, the preachers resorted to brutal violence, beating, burning, and hacking people to death with machetes. The police arrived just in time to save 14 villagers, who had been tied to trees, their bodies covered in the marks of unimaginable cruelty, beaten with clubs and even Bibles. Among the victims were children and pregnant women, caught in a crossfire of this twisted display of faith. As authorities began their investigation, they uncovered a grisly scene. Nearby an improvised church, they found caches of weapons, cache, and even more disturbingly, the bodies of 6 children, ranging from ages 1 to 17, along with an adult victim. To further add to the terror, they also discovered the mutilated body of a goat, a likely ritualistic sacrifice. In the end, 10 members of the New Light of God sect were arrested for their appalling crimes. But much like the case of Stephen Tari, it's hard to trace any of this bloodshed back to the teachings of the Bible. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!